Hi guys, while we're in quarantine, it's the best time to learn something new. That's why today I want to teach you how to make this lower third, a lower third with some nice pictures, a title and your name. But we're making this only with Adobe Premiere Pro. And by the way, welcome to ShootThatVideo. As an editor, I'm working most of the time in Premiere Pro, but for lower thirds or titles or things like that, you work most of the times in other software like After Effects for the animations, or Adobe XD or Adobe Photoshop for the graphics. But I wanted to show you what you can make inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. So only animations and graphics you can make inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. So if you're ready, then I'm ready too, and then we will just start the process of making this lower third. Over here I got a folder with components because we need some components to make this lower third. So first of all, the photos. The lower third consists of 3 different photos, and for this effect it's the best if those 3 photos are squares, and that's why I'm going to take screenshots of these squares. So I screenshotted 3 different square photos. You don't have to have like super good quality pictures. These small screenshots are enough. Also, I picked some social icons. We're firing up Premiere Pro. So from these screenshotted share photos, we will make a Polaroid that looks something like this. It's super easy to do and it's just a nice effect. So how will we do this? First, we start with the photos. I make the photos super long, so in the end we can make the lower third as long as we want. So we will make that Polaroid background out of a color matte. What is a color matte? Let's make one. Then we go to new item, we go to color matte. Then these are the official settings of your sequence, so that's okay. And then we want to make the color matte white. So this color matte white, we want to drag that on top of the pictures, but in reality we want the picture on top, so we change that, so now the picture is on top. A color matte is just a full screen white picture, you can call it, because how will we make from this full screen white picture the Polaroid background? We will use the effect crop. So we're going to effects, we type in crop, and we drag this effect on top of the color matte white. Then we're going to effect controls, and then over here under crop you have the options left, top, right and bottom crop. So first we want to have like a square that's a bit bigger than the picture itself. So we first start cropping the left side to something like this. So 41%, and because the picture is exactly in the middle, we know that the right side will also be 41% to get the exact same thing. So let's have a look at the top one, 34%, that looks like the same thickness. So then we also know the bottom is also 34%. But if we're going to look at the Polaroid picture, you can see that the bottom of that picture is always a bit bigger, because that means that the bottom will not be 34% cropped, but the bottom will be 30% cropped, maybe even 29. I think the borders can be still even smaller. So now the borders are even smaller, so it looks even more like a Polaroid picture. So to make 3 different Polaroid pictures, it's super simple, because we have these other 2 photos, and then we select the color matte white we made. We hold Alt on our keyboard and drag it underneath the other ones. So at this point we have 3 different Polaroid pictures. But at this point we're working with 2 different layers, and if we want to move the pictures around so we can make like the stack of Polaroids, then it's kind of hard to grab them all at the same time. So we will nest those 2 layers into 1 layer. So how we're making a nested sequence is super simple. We're selecting the layers we want, we hit the right mouse button and we go to nest. Polaroid 1, we hit OK, and then this is like 1 layer now. But if we're double clicking on this Polaroid 1 layer, then it's opening a new sequence with the 2 separate layers we had in the beginning. So you can always go back and change things. So we will do that with the other ones too. So now we have 3 different nice Polaroid photos. So we put those Polaroids on top of each other, and we will grab those Polaroids and we will put them on top of the video footage. So at this point we will select the Polaroids. I will turn this off right now, and then we're starting with Polaroid number 2, and we will play with the position. So at this point we made a nice stack, but it's kind of flat. So what I want to do is I want to add shadows onto the Polaroids, so there's a little bit more depth between the 3 pictures on the stack. So we select Polaroid 1, for example, we go to effects, and then we search for the effect drop shadow. We throw it onto Polaroid 1 in my case. So first I always start with a 100%. That's super ugly, so never use that. But that's just to see what you're doing with the other setting. If the distance is bigger, you see what you're doing. So I will always like to have the direction directly underneath the pictures, because if we're setting the distance right and we put a lot more softness on it, then I hope you can see it. You also have some shadows from the sides. So now we have a nice shadow, but it's way too much because the opacity is still on 100%. So we put the opacity on maybe 40. But the beautiful thing with an effect like this is that you can select the drop shadow and you can copy it by hitting your right mouse button and then copy. And then we can go to the next Polaroid, Polaroid 3. We select the layer and we can just hit Command V or Control V if you're working on Windows, and then the exact same drop shadow is now on the other Polaroid picture. So now we made this beautiful stack, and there's one last thing we have to do. We have to merge all the layers together again, because then we can drag that stack around. So we're selecting these 3 layers again. We're hitting a nest and we give it a nice name. So now the 3 layers are 1 layer again. We will place this beautiful stack in the right corner. So first I want to make it a little bit smaller, and we will drag this stack into the right corner. Now we will make the name bars, and that is something we will do with a technique we learned before, and that is making a color matte and cropping it into the right size. We will make another color matte. We want to also make that white. So now we have our own color matte for the name bar, so we can change the color of only that bar later. And then we will go to effects and search again for the crop, and then you just have to crop the top and the bottom to make a good looking bar, something like this. It don't have to be perfect, because now you can go to the motion and you can play again with the scale and position. And now of course the bar is above the Polaroid, but we can put the Polaroid stack of course on top. And of course the length of the bar is not important right away, because we can always crop the right more or less, so we can make it longer or less long. We still have to make one other bar, and that's the second bar. For that we have to make a new color matte, of course. In my case I want to grab a black color, but not really black, something like this. So we grab the color matte, drag it onto the timeline. We can go to the color matte name bar and to the effect controls, and then select motion, select crop. Now both of these things are selected. So now we can hit Command C on our keyboard or Control C. We go to the color matte not really black and we hit Command V. You can't see it of course right now because it's underneath the other bar, so we have to drag that down, and there it is. But we want that bar of course a little bit smaller. Scale it down a little bit. You can of course decide how big you want it, also again with the crop. So something like this is fine. And then there's one last fun thing to do, and that is also put a drop shadow on the bars. So we will find the drop shadow from before. We go to Polaroid stack, and then on this Polaroid there is the drop shadow. So we go to drop shadow, we will right mouse button and copy it, then close that, go to the color matte name bar and the not really black, select them both and just hit Command V. So Now we will start making the titles. The first one is simple because that's just one simple title. So we're hitting the type tool and we're clicking onto the program monitor, and then we're typing my full name, which is Joey. So we're selecting everything, and then if we open up this text tab underneath the effects controls, then we can change here everything we want. But you probably know how to make a text in Premiere Pro. But then of course this is the wrong color, because on the white one I want the color of the almost black, and on the almost black one I want the color white. So we hit fill, and then with this little tool we can select every color inside of this program, as you can see. Then we can also change the size of the text over here, so we can change it up to 80 for example, but we can also just do that with the position of the vector motion. So I'm thinking maybe I want to try another font, so now I'm trying PT Sans Narrow. This looks also kind of nice. But that's just design, and you can spend hours and hours more on that. And then the second text is a little bit more difficult. The text has a icon in it. So first of all, this icon is of course way too big. So we drag this icon a little bit smaller. It doesn't have to be the perfect size, but you will see that in a minute. So now we're going for the text layer. And then I will type, in this case, my YouTube channel. I want it to be white. We will just line it up nice. The YouTube icon probably a bit smaller. Now again, we want to move these two layers together. So what are we going to do? Nest the layers, and then we select both layers, the ShootThatVideo layer and the YouTube icon. We hit the right mouse button and we hit nest. So now we can select the icon plus text, and we can drag it all the way to here. Then we see that it is still a little bit too big. 70 looks nice, and then we can drag it to here. And I think, to be honest, that the ShootThatVideo text is a little bit too bold, so we're going into the icon plus text and we change it from bold to regular, and I do think that's better. And at this point we can adjust the name bars, of course, because now we know how long the text will be. So we can go to the name bar, we can go to crop, and we can go to right, and we can make it like this, and the other one something like this. We will animate all the things, and with all the things I mean 5 different things. So how will we do that? First of all, we want to animate the text and the name bar together. So the icon and the text over here, that's this one, and with that we have to nest the color matte, not really black. We hit the right mouse button, go to nest, and now we have one layer called title/channel bar that we can animate. The other one is my name plus the color matte name bar. So we can hit the right mouse button there, over there, nest. So now we have 3 different layers we can animate. By the way, this is not looking good. The Polaroid stack always have to be on top. So we double click on Polaroid stack, and then we can, over here, we can apply some fades. The animations I'm doing in this episode are super simple, but altogether are looking kind of nice. So we're going to effects, we're going to video transitions, we're going to dissolve, and then we're taking a cross dissolve. And we're putting that cross dissolve on top of the first Polaroid, of course. This cross dissolve is way too long, so we have to make that a lot smaller, like 10 frames, that's fine. Then we take the second one and we start that fade after the first one, so you get what I'm doing here, also like only 10 frames. And then the third one, of course, starts after the second one. I want the name bars coming from behind the Polaroids, sliding in. So of course we can start animating that after the Polaroids faded in. So we move the title bars. So we start with the full name bar. We're selecting full name bar. We're going to effect controls, and then we're going to play with the position. What you have to know about animation is that you're selecting one point, you're selecting a second point, and it will automatically go from one point to the second point. So we're starting at the beginning. We can do that over here. We can make this a little bit bigger. We're selecting the stopwatch so we can animate it, and then the first keyframe is already made, but the first keyframe we want to have it at the beginning position. So we move this one all the way to here. Don't freak out that you still see the bar from behind here, because we will fix that in the next step. So this is the begin point. For now I will choose the second point somewhere over here. For the second point we want it in the beginning position, of course, because we already made the design how we want it to be. So we can just hit this reset parameters, and then the second keyframe is the normal position. So now the animation is this. Maybe a little bit too long, but it's also a little bit boring, because now it goes from one point to the second point with the exact same boring speed. So how we can change that is with a preset called ease in. So we're selecting both points, we're hitting the right mouse button, then we go to temporal interpolation, and then we hit ease in. And what ease in does, that the animation is starting really fast and then slowed down at the end. And we can see how that works if we're clicking this arrow. So then we're opening the properties, then we already see that there is a little bit of a curve instead of a flat motion. And we can make that curve even bigger by grabbing one of these dots and dragging it to the left. So now you can see that that curve is really big. So the animation is probably really smooth now. And then it's slowed down. You can do that same animation on the second bar, but you can also, that's just to make it way easier, you can copy this motion and you can select the second title bar and hit Command V. So now the animation is exactly the same, but what I like more is zooming in on the timeline and then move the second title bar like 5 frames to the right. Then the second title bar is coming just a little bit later. And after we did that, it looks something like this. And that's already kind of nice, but there was one last thing I had to fix with you. And that is that in the beginning you see the name bars coming behind the Polaroids, but also on the left you see it peeking through. To do that I will put a mask on this part of the lower third, and of course not on the Polaroid pictures, but on the name bars. We have to select both bars and we have to nest them together. So nest. So now we can put a mask on top of this part of the video. So how we will do that is go to opacity, and then I'm hitting the 4-point polygon mask, and that will look something like this. And now if you can see, if I'm dragging this mask around, you can see that everything inside this mask is visible, but we want to have it the opposite, and that's super easy to do, because if we're scrolling down we can just hit this box, invert it, and now everything outside of the mask is visible. So with that said, I can make this mask a little bit bigger by selecting this point, holding shift, selecting the other point, then make this mask a little bit bigger like this. By the way, masking is a super heavy task for your computer, so it's super slow for my computer right now. But we will move this mask somewhere over here, so on top of the place we talked about, so everything on the left of the Polaroid pictures is now masked out and the text bar is not visible over there. So if we watch the name bar animation again, then it looks something like this. And that's what we want. You don't see it peeking from the beginning. You first see the first 3 Polaroid pictures fading in, and then zoom and zoom, the 2 name bars are fading in. That's our lower third. So this is the result we made, and I'm quite happy with it. And you can do all of this in just Premiere Pro. Please leave me a comment with what kind of other tutorials do you want to see, and then I hope to see you another time here on Shoot That Video. Because remember, wherever, however, just shoot or edit that video. See you the next time. Bye.